Any public communications today? No. Approval of the minutes of July 13th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of July 13th, except for one tiny thing. They keep spelling Jim Cowan's name. First they spell it correctly and then they spell it incorrectly. Whatever you choose, just be consistent. That's all I ask. I believe it's C-O-W-A-E-N or A-N. I don't even know. E-N, okay. Just be consistent, that's all.
We have a second.
Second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right. I know we don't have any new applications. So we're down to 375 Drosdick Drive.
I can use that. I'm happy to use that. That's the new plan, right?
That is the new plan.
Good, yeah. If that's easier for you.
Yep, let me just.
Put that one. Screen.
May have to adjust it. We're gonna have to adjust it.
All right.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is. It's okay.
This is fixed.
Okay.
Go on. Right.
For the record, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a land use attorney and a partner at the law firm of Tobin Carberry in New London. It's nice to see you again. As you remember, I was here last month where we did a comprehensive presentation of the pending application for my client, Aaron Realty Partners, for 375 Drosdick Drive. If you do remember at the last meeting, Deb had some professional development training before the meeting, and she hadn't had a chance to take a look at our revised plans. And so what we did is we tabled action on this item to give her, a reasonable amount of time to actually look at the plans, make sure we addressed all of her comments. And we also, in the meantime, we've also submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. So we had a revised plan set that was provided that addressed all of those issues. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out tonight. Two things. One is we did put the conservation easement area on the plan. It's shaded. This is the upland area at the northeast corner of the site. If you remember, it's actually off this. This is just the southern bulb of it right there. But this entire area in the northeastern corner of the site would be put under permanent conservation. We had offered that before. We now have it on the plan as well. And so it's part of our proposal for you tonight. If the plan was approved, we would work with your staff into actually drafting an actual conservation easement document with meets and bounds and with the language in terms of the uses that are allowed. I would just point out that a small portion of the easement does overlap with the Groton Public Utilities high tension power lines. So that area is already given to them for utility purposes. But the rest of the area there would be preserved in its natural state. As I explained the last time, this area is really difficult to reach because of the swath of wetlands that runs here. And it would be very difficult to get to for development, but it was something that came up in our site walk, and we wanted to show good faith to the commission and a willingness to put that in permanent conservation. We also put a number of notes on the plan as well, and that were requested by Deb. So as far as we understand, we've met all the requirements and addressed all of her conditions. Deb did draft a draft motion for your consideration tonight. We've had a chance to take a look at that motion. We don't have any issues with the motion. There's the 4 standard conditions, but there was also 2 additional modifications. One was to make sure that we adjust erosion controls to protect the on-site wetlands during the sewer connection work that we need to make to Drosdick Drive. We have no problem doing that. And the other thing was a submission of a long-term maintenance plan that would be required to be submitted prior to filing our site plan on the land records. for the mitigation area. And we received testimony at the last meeting from Mr. Cowan, our wetland scientist who's joining us tonight, about the efforts we're making to put in and enhance the buffer along the outer edge of the property. That sort of light blue shaded area, that the upland review area. So Deb has asked for us to actually put in writing a maintenance plan for that area. We talked briefly about it. Mr. Cowan's here if you have any additional questions, but that would be a requirement before we can actually file our site plan on the land records. Mr. Moran is here as well, our engineer. If you have any other questions tonight, again, Mr. Cowan is here. Also joining us is Mike Moore. Mike is the builder for the project. He's with Platinum Builders out of the Boston area. And just as an interesting aside, he actually built Ledges 1, the Ledges project. So he's back now after 18 years. A little bit more than that. I guess he started in the late 90s. So, 20 plus years, he's back to build phase 2 of this project. So he's excited to be involved in the project. And he came down to Boston tonight just to show you that he's interested in it. And he's also somebody who's has a good track record here in this community. So with that, I'll open it up if there's any other questions. But again, we've reviewed the draft motion. We have no problem.
I just have 2 questions. I would like to hear from Mr. Cowan about that buffer. And so were there any other concerns that you had when you went out? Those were the 2.
only 2, but, and so everyone knows you all were forwarded that motion as well. And do you need a paper copy of it? I have.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I just would like to hear just a little bit about that. Because again, part of this is in the 100-foot upland review area.
Absolutely.
And so I would love to know what you're doing in the 50-foot upland review area.
Okay, certainly. So one of my goals was in this whole process was to protect the mature tree canopy around the edge of the wetland. So I had the surveyor go out and locate the edge of that canopy so we could maximize the protection of that canopy. As has been said earlier, the rest of the site is highly disturbed with stockpiling of excavated material from phase 1. And so lots of invasives and so forth. So that has low habitat value. But the mature tree canopy along the edge of the existing wetlands has the highest value in that area. So we wanted to maximize the protection of that. So what my proposal is that when prior to construction, when silt fence or erosion controls are put in, that we identify the tree canopy of the trees along the edge, and if there's any right on the line, can we adjust things a little bit, or maybe put in a shallow tree well or something to maximize the protection of that canopy. So that would be field decisions with someone like myself and whoever's doing the grading and clearing of the land. So that would be the first important step. And so then we establish that edge, and then no grading happens beyond that, except there are a couple of places where there are outfalls of either stormwater or groundwater footings. And so those would also be sited around trees to the extent.
Just ask one, stop you. So could you just make a line where that tree canopy is on this map for me, please? It don't have to be exact, but just rough.
So this
It's the 50-foot line.
yeah, it's the squiggly line here. See
Scallop.
see this? Yeah, the scallops. That's
Okay.
the edge of the tree canopy.
But it's kind of near the 50-foot. Would you
Yeah.
say that would be a pretty true statement?
Yeah, well, yeah, and in some cases, yeah, it's very close. And in some cases, the edge of the canopy may be here, but the trunk of the tree may be 20 feet over. And so you can protect the canopy. You can protect the trunk of the trees and the roots, even if the canopy is overhanging, and you might have to do some pruning. So there would be some choices to be made in concert with the construction crew to say, we've got to get in here. This is a tight corner. We've got to turn around here. What can we do here? So those would be field decisions. So that's the first important part. And in concert with that would be removal of invasives along the edge we're not proposing to remove all the invasives on the site, but we want to remove them where there's disturbance, because that's where they explode. And so we want to protect that edge of disturbance, remove invasives at the beginning, so we're not spreading those invasive roots around in the upland review area and so forth. And then the silt fence is also important for keeping amphibians out of the work area. So I've got specification for it to be towed in so amphibians can't get underneath. And that during the migration season, there be regular inspections along that edge. So if there are any amphibians that have made their way into the work area, they can be put on the other side into the safe haven. And so that's a standard practice that we do during vernal pool breeding season to protect them. Then in terms of enhancing the buffer, there's two aspects. One is we would place coarse woody debris or logs that are cut and with good contact to the soil. And those logs provide excellent habitat for amphibians. They hide underneath it. It attracts insects, food for them. Perfect habitat. So where it's appropriate, obviously we don't want to disturb a lot of vegetation in placing those logs. So that would be during the clearing process where you would identify where would be good locations to place logs along the edge. And then post-construction would be planting. We've got an extensive planting plan, both of trees, shrubs, and herbs, wildflowers, and as well as the seed banks. And those would all go in, but again, in that disturbance area, there's a lot of invasives in the work area, and they could migrate or be along that edge. And so we have to be vigilant before we do planting, that we again go through, deal with any invasives, eradicate them before we plant. I've seen lots of failures where things were planted before the invasives were controlled. Then you come and try to control the invasives and you kill what you planted. So the sequence is important, and having monitoring of that sequence. And then after the planting, it usually takes about 3 years for things to get established and stabilized. There can be minor erosion. There can be areas that didn't get well vegetated that have to be reseeded. A variety of things that can happen. And some plants die, some get overbrowsed by deer. And so during those first 3 years, we want to get the invasives under control and the vegetation established. And the one thing I will say, that a landscape is dynamic. We're not anticipating that if we plant 20 trees, these 20 trees are going to be here forever. They are the pioneers to get things started. In some situations, some of those trees either die out or get overbrowsed, but they give an opportunity for the native seeds to get established and to get the process going. So it's not intended to be a static landscape, though, in many cases, most of the plants survive where they're intended. And I would, myself or whoever's doing the layout, we're looking at vantage points. Where's a flowering dogwood going to be effective for the residents? And so we're looking at where we place things with an eye for aesthetics, as well as wildlife function.
So that's great. Thank you so much. So on this map then, can you just explain to me, so this would be approximately where your silt fence, again, I see a squiggly line there, here, squiggly, squiggly, squiggly. And then this is all going to be pavement. So are you suggesting that you're going to be working in this area in the 50-foot buffer?
We will be working in the 50-foot buffer, primarily along the edge. There will be planting, I would say, around the toe of the basin would be a prime location.
Okay.
where we have the outfalls. This one's for stormwater. These areas are good. And at the toe, now these are retaining walls, so below the retaining wall is going to be the area that we're working with. So we'd be planting here, though, you know, here's very steep, but in this area, we do have opportunity for planting. So in some places, it's fairly narrow, but in other places, I noticed there are invasive trees there. So this tree canopy may also change to some extent where we're removing invasives. Say, for instance, if there's a tree of heaven or a black locust. So those could provide planting opportunities as well. So that's one of the reasons that I don't like to show each individual trees. I'd rather give you a number of the quantities of what we're going to plant, and those would be field located based on the conditions post-construction, which we can't know now exactly.
Yeah, so, Seamus Ryan for the record, so that's what this plan shows. It's a, again, we didn't put exactly where the trees and shrubs will be. But all of the green.
Move that over.
Sure, I'm sorry. But all of the green areas, based on the color code or the plantings, in the green column here, red are in the red column, and gray are in the gray column here. So, using these plantings, using the list with this kind of code, color code, Jim will place them where, where he sees fit in this area.
But I guess my point is, so could you please point out the existing tree canopy on this map?
Yeah, it's right here. It's still the scallop line. So there will be planting with.
It looks like there's going to be I remember this map from the last time, and that's why I asked this question. So I'm just making sure I'm clear on, you're going to protect the creek.
That's the edge of the canopy, though.
Right.
The trees are.
You're going to
set back.
protect the creek tree cover, the canopy line, but then you're going to be working within the 50-foot upland review area.
Right. And so in some areas, the tree canopy currently is thin. That we'll plant, in other areas, we have a denser tree canopy. So, so we've provided an adequate number, and I will say what I'm recommending are small wildlife grade trees that are more affordable. And there's a couple of reasons for doing that. Planting wildlife grade material, they're seed grown. So they're New England ecotypes, as opposed to a cultivar that might be from North Carolina. And so I like to use New England stock, and the seed grown will reproduce and have viable seedlings. Whereas a cultivar, they're all genetically identical. And so even if they cross pollinate, you don't get the diversity that you would from seed grown. The other thing about smaller seed grown plants is they're easier to install. It's a rocky area, and so if you have to get a tree spade in there or something to plant a big root ball, it's more difficult, and they don't tend to do as well as a smaller seed grown plant.
I certainly trust you, for sure, no question. I just, again, typically from our standpoint, we are pretty careful up to 100 feet. This is obviously a big project. I'm not suggesting I'm up, but, then to sort of know that you have permission to be pretty much right up to the wetland, it just gives me a little pause. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, well,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't anticipate, if I were going to have a third color here, it would be right along the edge of the silt fence.
Well, that's why quite honestly, his picture was better than yours. Shay was just saying, because this one really this is the one I remembered from the last time. And I'm like, that's right.
So the planting's mostly going to be along the limit of disturbance, between the limit of disturbance, say, which is where the silt fence is, and any retaining walls or pavement.
So you might be on the other side of the silt fence.
Some places.
Yes.
And those are places that would be appropriate to go across because the canopy isn't thick there or.
Again,
there's
I
usually-
trust you,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, in the real world,
Mhm.
stuff happens. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, stuff
Right, well,
stuff
yeah,
happens, and-
yeah.
And that's, I just, we've all been playing this game for 30 years
Yeah,
and we just have seen a lot.
I know, and I have also,
I know,
and
I
I
know.
get called after everything's built and say, will you come and inspect it? And I was, the plans, I was supposed to be there before you started, and I was called in 3 years later, so.
And so that's just my only, again, because now we're basically saying, okay, for work.
Yeah.
And we rarely do that for a single family house, let alone. So I'm just gonna be quiet. I really like you guys. I don't want you to think I don't like you.
So I'll just say a couple of other things.
Hold on, just for a second.
Okay,
So what would you need to feel better about this, and out of curiosity, I mean,
Again, I'm just stating what I think is to be truth, and that's that we typically don't allow this much activity within a wetland.
There is an easy way to do that.
Upland
To
area.
address your concern, and that is just to require a wetland scientist to oversee the mitigation plans.
But what I was gonna say, but again,
So
I
it's
just,
not 3 years, not that.
I'm really, impressed with that conservation bit that you guys are gonna give, and I think that's an incredible gift. Again, we walked that millions of years ago when we walked that line, right, Deb? That, what did we have? Had to do some easement in there, and I remember being in there and it's like, whoa, so that's a big deal. So I'm very aware of that. I'm just stating for the record, and if that, whatever you just said, could be reality, like seriously, you're gonna be out there, like not just.
Not after the fact.
Exactly, not like, I can't tell you the number of times the bulldozer man, the backhoe man, oh, I didn't see that line. And so now you're just so very close. You're so very close.
Right, and so that's why we're saying, and you, however, you're comfortable that prior to shovels in the ground, or that it be walked by Deb or his town staff and say, we've marked the line, we've got orange construction fencing in to protect these trees.
Those notes are on the plan.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we're requiring a pre-construction meeting before things get going so that we can reiterate the conditions of both your permit and whatever approval planning and zoning is.
Right, and that's something that I strongly recommend, and that was my recommendation as well, that there be a pre-construction meeting. And so, but I totally understand that, that accidents happen, that not everybody reads a plan, or reads the details. So that's why when I do a plan, I like to have not only notes, but call outs. So when they're looking at a sheet like this, they can see, well, there's a call out. What does this mean
What
here?
does a call out mean?
A call out, this is a call out here that says, so you have a point and then you have a note. This is a call out. Removal of invasive species to be conducted during site.
Removal
remote
preparation
preparation.
phase.
So that's this area here. So that goes for the whole green zone. So this is a call out on the plan that the construction crew would have. And
Who's
so,
gonna be removing those invasive species? Who's gonna ID those invasive species in the
well,
field?
someone like myself would identify them. And again, this is what we have to work out with the, in the pre-construction meeting as the general contractor. Is the person doing the site work, are they going to be responsible? I was involved in Perkins Farm. I did Perkins Farm in Stonington, and we had an invasive control company that we brought in at key phases of that multi-year 3-phase project. And so we had this company that.
What are we talking about? Hand removal, or are we talking about, bulldozers, or what are we talking about?
Typically it's herbicide. It depends on the species, mugworts, and that's why I work with professionals. And if we're working near or in a wetland, then it all has to be wetland approved herbicides, which there are. For instance, there are a lot of details of some herbicides that are toxic to aquatic organisms and others that aren't. And I work with a company like All Habitat Services or others who that's their whole thing. They do that. They also do plantings. I work with them on a variety of projects. So that all needs to get sorted out pre-construction in terms of who's going to do that work. On individual trees and shrubs, it can happen in a couple ways. Typically, either the individual is sprayed, individual shrub or tree is sprayed, or it's cut, and then the stump is treated. So it's painted, or so it's surgical. It's not a broadcast spray. Because obviously we want to protect all of the good vegetation.
You can also get rid of mugwort by just pulling it up by the roots.
It takes a multiple years, lots of effort to do that. And I've tried on my 5 acres and I have not succeeded, but I haven't put in the time probably that it takes to do that.
All right.
I would just want to say, point out one other thing, and that is in the wetland zone, in the pink zone, there are far fewer plants. And what I have specified in there are a few different species that are high pollinator value that would increase the biodiversity of the wetlands. And those are like 2-inch plugs. So it's not like we're going to go in there with equipment and put in trees or anything, but they're things like cardinal flower, turtlehead, which is the host plant for Baltimore checker spot. So what I'm trying to do here is introduce plants that are going to increase the biodiversity and function. And the reason this is
Yeah, I get it. It's just, if I knew you, if I thought you were doing it, I'm just like, you've just heard this song a lot. And it's just like, ugh.
And sometimes it is successful.
And sometimes it's
Sometimes
successful.
it is.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
always.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'll say is, because I know we're working with a 50-foot buffer, we have a lot more plants in here. Often I'll just use a seed mix for the wildflowers, but if you look at the number of wildflowers we have in here, I know we want to get this established quickly, and we want to have high diversity, and we want to maximize the pollinator butterfly value of that edge as much as we can, and get it going faster, because a seed mix can take 3 to 5 years for the seeds to get established.
Suffice to say that we're going to keep a close eye on it. And if it starts failing, you're going to know about it.
Without a doubt. I would just, as a final comment, this mitigation effort is not something that this town said you have to do. We came forward with it from initially because we wanted to leave it a better situation than it is today. This is developer initiated. And so, when we looked at this property, we looked at the disturbed site, said that's where we're going to build. And in that transition zone between the disturbed and the wetlands, we said, how can we make this better than it is today? So, this is our effort to try to be sensible, environmentally sensitive in the way we're developing the property. And we appreciate the opportunity to show you that we can do something, really positive. And maybe it's a model for other projects when you have people that are doing work in close proximity to wetlands, might say, hey, what can you do to help improve that buffer area for the benefit of the adjacent wetland? So again, though, thank you for your time tonight. And again, if you have any other questions, you're more than happy to answer.
So one of the conditions I suggested in the draft motion that I sent to you is that a long-term maintenance plan for this mitigation area be prepared, because once these guys go away, it's the landscape company that the apartment complex hires. And so they need to know that this is not a mow area, and maybe once a year, twice a year, someone needs to come in and identify invasive species and just keep a handle on that. So Jim is going to be preparing that prior to the plans being filed.
And who's gonna be the person that's gonna monitor that?
Monitor it.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the plan will say that there will be a reporting to the town. That's typically what we do when we have a monitoring plan, a yearly report.
That come here or planning and zoning?
It comes into the office.
So there's no grass on this whole thing?
There's landscaping islands within the parking lot. And all there. Yeah, there's gonna be grass in certain areas, yes.
And one of the things around the perimeter, just this is an attention to detail, any place where there's not a retaining wall, which I don't know if there's very many places, I think down in this area here, what I recommend is a no-mow ecological lawn seed mix that doesn't require lime or fertilizer or water once it's established. And it can be mowed, but mowing's optional. It only gets 9 inches tall. So it's an informal grass edge, but I just know, you know, if you're getting out of your car, you don't want to get out into a 4-foot tall meadow.
Can you
And
remind me
so-
how tall the retaining wall is?
I think at the ward point, the highest point is all in one section and tapers in 3.
Three,
Yeah.
three to six, is that what you said?
Oh, I didn't, sorry. 6, I think, at the highest point is 6 feet tall. And one of the sections, but it tapers with grade down there.
Tapers with grade, gotcha, sorry. I'm getting older by the minute, my hearing, I think, is
Yeah.
going. Sorry.
And so the point is, and typically on a project like this, usually a 3 to 5 foot verge, which is like the edge of pavement, is a mow zone, just so people can get in and out of their cars or walk, navigate. And so that area would be a no-mow lawn seed mix.
But where is that, Jim? So if this is the retaining wall, okay, you're gonna mow on the other side of the retaining wall?
No, so along this edge here, below the retaining wall here, there's parking area, and I don't, Seamus, I don't know if this zone around the parking here is designated.
That's
for
where I
that.
would think you'd be
So
mowing.
I would want a no-mow mix at the edge of pavement,
Gotcha.
so you're not having runoff with fertilizer going into your wetland. Of course, this is not going into the wetland, this is going this way, but nonetheless, that's just a
But you're
general.
not talking about this area being a mowed area.
No.
Landscape architects prepared a landscaping plan for the other areas. So there are shrubs and grasses that he has specified on his plan.
So I just put that in as a general note.
It's all in the parking area though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's basically, it's in the parking area in between the parking area and our meadow plantings. So if the meadow plantings are coming up close to the edge of pavement here, it would make sense to have a no-mow mix, so people getting out of their cars have an area that, even if it's not mowed, it's only 9 inches tall as opposed to 3 or 4 feet.
All right, other questions? We do have a draft motion.
And I sketched out another condition just based on some of the conversation regarding the wetland scientists.
I love that so much. And I've said that recently, if somebody can read it. I can read it. I'll make a motion to approve inland wetlands 22-05 multifamily residential development 375 Drosdick Drive for the construction of parking area, utilities and stormwater facilities and upland review area associated with a multi-unit residential development. Motion to approve inland wetlands 22-05 multifamily residential development application for the following reasons. There are no wetlands or watercourses lost as a result of this project. The sediment and erosion control plan will protect the wetland during construction. The applicant has proposed a wetland mitigation plan that will enhance the site's previously disturbed area. This permit is subject to the 4 standard conditions and the following modifications. Number 1, the erosion control shall be adjusted to protect the wetlands during the sewer connection to Drosdick Drive. Number 2, a long-term maintenance plan for the wetland mitigation area shall be developed for the property owner and approved by the planning and development staff prior to filing the site plan in land records. Number 3, a wetland scientist shall oversee the mitigation plan and certify that it has been completed per the approved plan.
All right, we have a second.
Second it.
All right. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right.
Right, you have our faith. You have our faith.
Thank you.
Well, back to you.
Yeah, but that fast.
That gentleman, the man who dumped all of his stuff on the other lot? No, but he was the builder.
Yeah, but that was approved.
No, yeah, right, that was approved, but he also built the buildings, the ledges. He was the construction manager for that.
Yeah, but who dumped all the stuff on the next door?
Yeah, we had approved that as a site for, what do you call it?
Yeah, it was.
Tailings?
Storage.
It was storage for the material.
Oh,
During
okay.
the, yeah.
Built the building.
Okay, what's this?
Okay,
highway.
it is. So
Okey-dokey.
as Bill Sweeney will let you know, this is a site plan that we recently received for an apartment complex off of Gold Star Highway. Number of you may remember the site. It was the site of the super Walmart that was ultimately not.
Oh, I have
not
forgotten that
approved,
site, Deb.
Not approved by the planning commission and was never constructed. It's a portion of that site.
Yep.
So there's some stormwater discharge that is outside of the regulated area, but is close to the regulated area. So I asked them to bring it to you for a jurisdictional ruling to determine whether or not you want a permit for this thing.
Cool. Carry on.
Okay.
You want to put it up?
I'd like to see its location.
Yep.
I may have a
This is right
conflict.
next to
I'm
that,
on Gold Star.
Yes.
I mean, now more.
That's right.
And right for the suites, the little hotel, right across from the toll gate.
See,
No, that's, yeah,
I can move it so it
that's
sort
right.
of,
Yeah, but let me just,
when you open it, it'll get right side up.
no, well, let me just.
I could turn that.
Yeah, but then they can't really see it.
Okay.
Let me just see things in there.
The site was surrounded by water, wasn't it?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't this site surrounded by water? This Walmart
It was,
thing?
it butted up to Abalone.
Not this. Yeah, the Abalone portion,
Yeah.
portion that Abalone now has some wetlands on it, but the
Right.
sites, I'll show you in a second.
Yeah, I
It's basically
don't think
dry.
I've ever been.
It's
They
a
were
big chunk of
piecing
rock.
together a bunch
That's what
of
it is.
properties.
Has this been developed already or has it?
No.
No,
No, it was never done.
Remember where the old plumbing, remember where the old plumbing place used to be?
No. Plumbing, no.
yeah, exactly. Shetucket plumbing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right across from where Toll Gate Road comes out.
Exactly. Me too. I'll turn the page, because maybe it'll help you guys. I can give you a little bit back. So here's the site. Oh, for the record, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a land use attorney and a partner at T-Course in New London. I represent a company called AR Building. AR Building built the 150 units across from the sub base up on the hill on Route 12 several years ago. They built a lot of the new apartments in New London as well. So they're pretty active in the area. Got projects all over New England now. They're a company out of Pennsylvania. They own like 10,000 units of luxury housing throughout Mid-Atlantic and New England now. And they're working on this site on Gold Star Highway. A little bit of background on it. The parcel itself is right across from Colgate Road, which comes in right here. It's on Gold Star Highway. It actually right now consists of 4 parcels. The Fatone family owned Shetucket Plumbing for many years. This is the old Shetucket Plumbing site. That building's been torn down if you've driven by it. To the east of it is another vacant parcel, wooded, that is owned by PJ&A, which is the Fatone family holding company. About 3 years ago, before COVID, the town put out these 2 parcels. These are town of Groton parcels. Total of about 12 acres of land that they put out to RFP for development. And one of the things they were looking at was multifamily housing. And so the great thing about this property is there's a lot of acreage, but they have only a little tiny bit of frontage, less than 140 feet of frontage. And so my client, PJ&A, I represent both PJ&A and the developer, AR Building. PJ&A submitted an RFP and said, listen, we've got not a lot of land area, but we have a lot of frontage. And if you took the 4 parcels and put them together, you could get a really good development pad for a multifamily project. And so they applied for the RFP and they won the RFP. This was right before COVID hit. So the project got stalled for a couple of years, but eventually my client brought in a development partner, AR Building, to take a look at the site. And the plan that was approved by the RFP that the town council put up was a 300-unit apartment project. So what we've done is we are working with the town, and we actually went to the town council back in April with our concept plan, which I'll show you, looked very similar to that, and it got approval for that. And so we've now submitted to P&Z for the project as well. This property, if you're not familiar with it, if you haven't walked it, this is the Abalone Land down here to the south. This land is very rocky. You can see these sort of circles. These are all knobs of rock. And so this is like, in some ways, it's like a moonscape of ledge on the property. The whole property is rock. And so when rain falls on it, it flows in all different directions. You can see also that there are some swales. That's when you have those curves that go in the same way. So basically when water runs, it runs in 6 different directions off this site right now. Difficult site. We've had a lot of people look at it, but AR has a real specialty in actually doing ledge removal and rock removal, that they're really skilled at it. And that's something that they do and been very successful with. So
We're anticipating a lot of blasting.
there'll definitely be some blasting on this property. Absolutely. And there'll be a lot of physical rock removal too. The rock is a mixture of some sort of spoiled rock as well. So there could be some physical removal of the rock as well, but there is a lot of rock on the property. So just to give you a couple other things, this property was surveyed multiple times as part of the Walmart project. Never found a wetland on it. Was surveyed again after that, never found a wetland on it. We surveyed it again, we found a wetland on it. So like the 3rd time's the charm. There's a tiny little wetland in the northeast corner of the site, right here in a swale, right there. That's the only on-site wetland on the property. There is some off-site wetlands. So on the Abalone property, there is an area, there's sort of in this swale continues, there is a wetland here as well. We've done a 100-foot buffer from that wetland shown on that plan. There is no upland review zone on our property from that wetland, but I just show it to you just to show you that, we did look at off-site wetlands as well. So here's the proposed project. The project is not 300 units, it's 270 units. So we actually dropped. We originally had 324 when we went to the council. We dropped it because the rock removal with this area right here would just be so expensive that we've actually removed that building altogether. So this northeastern edge of the site is being left in its natural state. So the wetland in that corner, here is a 100-foot wetland buffer. We have no disturbance within 100 feet. In fact, we don't even have any land clearing to almost 200 feet. And we're 200 plus feet to the closest, pavement area in the project. So we have no work within the jurisdictional area of that wetland whatsoever. And again, we have 5 buildings. They are 4-story apartment buildings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We also have a community building with an outdoor pool. The community building has a lounge, a fitness center. We have surface parking as well. And we're trying to keep as much of the vegetation that's existing on the site. So we're even keeping trees between the buildings. We want to try to keep it, very, very forest-like, try to keep sort of the natural vegetation to the extent possible. The southern portion of the site up against Abalone, we're really trying to limit our clearing and keeping some large blocks of forest land as well. One of the issues is this is in the water protection, water resource protection district. So we have limitations on how we can deal with stormwater. So we really have to use surface detention basins. I'll show you on the next plan, some of our surface detention. This is just a blow up of the site plan. This is sort of the front half of the site, Gold Star Highway. We've got a match line to the back. Again, it's a blow up of the plan we just looked at. Here's the back side here, the property. So here is the drainage plan for the project. What we have here is we have a series of catch basins. Basically, all the water that comes off the roofs is captured and put in subsurface infiltration. We're allowed to do that because it's roof water. But all the water that's coming off the parking lots is actually captured by deep sumps, hooded catch basins, and it's run inline through hydrodynamic separators and into a series of detention basins. And you can see we've done, a group here, a group here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. Why do we have so many surface detention basins? We're trying to match. Remember I said that when a drop of water falls, it goes 6 different ways on this site that's all rock. We're trying to match those flow patterns as much as we can. So if a drop of water fell here and it used to go this way, it still goes this way, but now it goes through a hydrodynamic separator into these detention basins. These detention basins are structured, so they'll have outlets into a discharge into the basin, and then there'll be an invert for an overflow that's a little bit above. So the water will come in, it will do some renovation in the detention basin. And when it hits a certain level, it will begin to trickle out through these pipes. And each one of these has a pipe, an outlet pipe that we've included. We've also included emergency overflows. We're required to by your regulations in the DEP stormwater manual, so that on very large storm events, when I'm talking like 50, 100-year storms, well above the design storm, if it did overtop, what we do is we try to recreate the same discharge points that exist today, so that it will flow in the same direction that it was flowing when it was all rock. Big thing is all of our peak, we've been able to keep our peak discharges to actually reduce them through the all the way up through the 25-year storm on this project. So let's see if I can. So again, here is the one wetland on the property, the 100-foot buffer. We do have a discharge point. This is our discharge point. Right now, all the water in this area comes down through this swale. This detention basin has that invert, that raised invert. It discharges to a pad, and it just slowly leaks that water out into the same swale, and it gets renovated through that area. Again, that is almost 200 feet from the edge of wetland. And then in the back property as well. Right now, there's a swale right here. All the water here sheds this way onto the Abalone property. Now we pick it up, we keep it in the detention basin, and we meter it out over to the riprap pad to the same swale that it goes to today. Same thing with the largest detention basin in the back. We take up all this area, which flows this way. We pick it up in the detention basin, and then we outlet it. And we have a little bit more room to work with because the swale is a little wider. We actually put in basically a level spreader to spread that out to make sure there's not erosive velocity in that. So again, the only wetland on the property is this wetland. We are not doing any work within your jurisdictional area. And the closest off-site wetland is on the Abalone property down at the base of this swale. And it's based on the first drawing that I showed you. Where we showed the view area. Let me just go back to that page. Just pretty sure. They've asked us to measure out the 100-foot upland review area to that. and it doesn't touch the property line. So all of our disturbance is outside the 100 feet. Under Connecticut law, you can only regulate what you have jurisdiction over. That being said, there are some court cases that say that a commission may extend its jurisdiction outside of its upland review area. To do so, you have to make a finding that there is something going on outside of your upland review area that has a likelihood to cause a significant adverse impact, not to the upland review area, but to the resource itself. I don't think that's the case here. Certainly, there's nothing, I think, in this area. And even in this area, as I said before, this is an existing drainage way going down. As long as we've designed this outfall to meet standards to make sure there's not erosive force in that area, there should be no adverse impact whatsoever. And, you know, our engineers have basically laid this out to that extent right now. We are going to be reviewed by planning and zoning, but Deb thought this is a big project. It's a project with town-owned land involved in it too. We have a contract with the town council. She wanted me to come before you and at least share what we were doing. One of the things we do want to try to do is there are walking trails on the Abalone Land. We really want to work with Abalone to create connections to our project. We don't want the public coming onto the private project, but we certainly want the ability to have trailheads on this project.
That's hard to do.
To people to come, you know, for people that are going to be living here to go and use the Abalone trails.
Right.
So
That's easy to do.
yes,
The other one's hard to do.
well, it's just difficult for security reasons, and safety reasons, but we certainly want to try to make those connections with Abalone and have, because that's a real, from our perspective, that's a huge benefit to this project. These are higher end units. If you've seen any of the AR units, if you've been inside of them, you know, these are all granite countertops, stainless steel, cutting edge units, really targeted toward the EV workforce and the engineers and the growth of EV based on the Columbia class submarines. So those are who are the core of who our tenants are. I represent AR for 7 years now. I have 7 projects in Connecticut under development or construction right now. And you know, they're a company that, you know, stands by their work and we work really closely with Deb and Diane was still here to get that project on Pleasant Valley Road approved. So
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
And this is really for you guys, okay? And if you put a detention basin in, is it not like a vernal pool? Didn't you just create a wetland? Is that within our jurisdiction?
So it wouldn't necessarily at the beginning of construction, right after it's constructed, meet the definition of a wetland or a water course in this case.
Yeah.
But there have been certain circumstances in town where we actually have over 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah,
and
long
it
time.
has met the definition of a wetland. So no, right when they construct this, I'm quite sure it will not meet the definition of a water course. If they intercept groundwater, and you get wetland vegetation and there's standing water in it, it may indeed at some point. meet the
Over a
definition.
period of years, you may have a situation where the
Becomes a wetland.
soils
over time.
become hydric.
Exactly. Or becomes a water course. I mean, you know, basically.
I just did
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
What, of course, really.
I just did a project for AR up in Wyndham and they are doing it on an old gravel pit. And so the old gravel operator had dug so deep, he intercepted the groundwater table and then he abandoned the site. So 25 years have passed. Well, those borrow pits that hit the water table, hydric soils have developed now. And in fact, we found some amphibian eggs in the gravel pit. So we had to design our project around those areas. So
This same thing happened down on the Sunoco property down by the airport, where they had gravel pits, which were abandoned for 40 years, and they are wetlands now.
I suspect the depth of these ponds, they're not going to intercept groundwater. It's very unlikely to become hydric soil.
yeah, in fact, the deepest
They're
pond,
fairly shallow.
this is the deepest pond we have. And so the base of the pond is at 85 and the upper limit of it is 92. So it's 7 feet.
Yeah.
That's the deepest. The biggest pond is at 90, has a base of 92, top of berm 96. The biggest pond is a 4-foot depth.
But again, that's going to be their liability.
I understand that.
You don't permit the creation of wetlands, you permit things that happen in a wetland. So if it turns into a wetland, it's a thing in years from now.
And then they come back and they want to put something right next to it, then they're.
Then they have a problem.
That's when the problem lot comes in.
So these will be open.
Yeah,
These-
vegetated.
Yeah, there'll be plantings in these ponds and they'll be open, yes. We can't, like, you might have seen on a lot of projects now, we have like, the subsurface infiltrator systems. We just did it on Drosdick. So in your water resource protection district, you can't do that just because of the concern about something getting in there and getting into the groundwater table. So it was one of the challenges on this site was to develop it because we like to use those, quite frankly, in a lot of sites as a way to, and the cost of them has come down, so it's actually advantageous. But here we have to use surface detention. And we also, there's a requirement to keep a certain percentage of the site undeveloped. So we had to keep at least 20% of it in natural conditions. So we're doing that on this layout between this area, the center area, and then that northeast corner where we're not building.
You really gonna be able to keep that center area without blasting it? That's gonna be interesting.
The center area? Yeah, we'll be able to. There's a knob right here. It's actually going to be pretty cool. It's,
Cheaper for them, frankly.
Yeah.
I think they will do that.
yeah. So we work with, if you know where L&M Hospital is in New London, behind L&M down off of Mansfield Road, that's AR's first project in the area. And they had a knob of rock that was 25 feet high that they blasted down for that project. And they're doing phase 2 right now of that as well. They work with Trenzia companies out of Westerly. So they're not afraid of that, of difficult sites because they're vertically integrated. So I work with a development arm of the company. They own their own construction company, and then they manage their own company as well. So they have a management arm too. So all of the buildings they build, they keep for portfolio. That means they never sell them. So the company was formed in the early 1960s, and they've only sold 300 units in all the time they've been operating. So they're owned by one individual. It's a privately held, closely held firm, Dick Nurnberg, and he owns everything. And he just builds his portfolio. If they have a certain way of doing things, a certain level of a standard that you have to meet because of him. And they're probably my best client in terms of just being able to perform and do quality work. One of the things, while I don't believe this falls within your jurisdiction, we work really closely with your staff. We have a great relationship with Deb's office. And so issues regarding erosion and sediment control, issues regarding stormwater design, we're going to work with them on those. And I'm confident that, what's shown on the plan will be built to that because they're not giving it to a builder to build. They're building it themselves, and they're building it to last because they're going to hold it. 20 years from now, AR Building is still going to be the company that owns and operates this site.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I know Dick's
Got a good
son,
track record.
and
Oh.
so he's set up right to take over when Dick finally steps down. So, like I said, they're a great client, and this is a property that the town has been trying to get developed for a long time. We're coming up on 3 years from the original agreement date that we had for this. And it's a complex deal because we got a lot of moving parts. We've got the private property owner, the Patone family, we've got the town with these parcels, and then we've got this, regional developer. But the town council's been unanimously in support of it. This is the kind of housing that the town wants. And we think we can do it on this piece of property and do a really, sensible project. But I did want to come tonight because Deb asked me.
Any words from us?
Well, I need to know whether or not you want to require a permit for this, or if you believe it does not need a permit because it's outside the regulated area.
I believe it does not require.
I would say there's no
Yeah.
permit required.
We still have to protect the wetlands on site. If there are any issues, we fall within your jurisdiction. If we do something wrong up here, we've got to take care of it. So, and I work across the river. I like doing business here. You have my word that we're going to make sure
Yeah,
that
that
we do
was
it.
my only question. I mean, the fact that there is that little tiny wetland on site doesn't require,
No.
granted he's
you're thinking
200 feet away.
subdivision regulations. No,
Subdivision
site
would.
plan, It does not.
Okay.
And
Because
frankly,
they're
that
so
really
far
wasn't-
away.
That really wasn't my concern. My concern was the off-site
Okay.
wetland. I mean, they are discharging stormwater outside of the upland review area in an area where stormwater flows now. But given that it's fair, it's maybe 110 feet from the wetland rather than 100. I didn't want to make that call. I might have made the call if this site were flat and just told them he didn't need a permit.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's better now than it is right now. You can see, you can look at this, if a raindrop falls anywhere in this southeastern quadrant, it goes right to that point. So in a big rainstorm, it just runs down that gully. Now there's gonna be a detention basin to capture it, slow it down, and process any sediment that's coming through there, and then leak it out through that 15-inch pipe. So I think it's actually a better design as a result.
I just out of curiosity, like, what kind of controls do you have when you're blasting and all, and you have all this blasted rock around and in terms of ultimately the water moving through that and changing its chemistry or whatever, and
Well, all of our
how do you
blasting,
handle that?
yeah, all of our blasting has to be overseen by the fire marshal. So, we use, I've been on a lot of their sites. They're actually still blasting right now over in New London for phase 2, but they use these huge blast control mats. So,
I know that.
yeah,
But I'm talking after there's a whole issue here with blasting, which is not in the jurisdiction, I think, of
And
this
that's
group,
exactly right.
and so, which I don't want to
But
get
you're right,
into.
sometimes the flow of the groundwater
And,
changes. with
and
the-
I'm very familiar with the fire marshals.
Sure.
efforts, and, but, no, I was just wondering, you're gonna have a site with chopped rock all over the place and dust, okay, and places where, water's gonna settle on that site and pick up stuff that normally would not have picked up because now you have ground up rock and this sort of thing. So I was just wondering what's gonna happen during the construction phase, and,
yeah.
So
okay.
the sediment and erosion control plan will address
I'm
that.
gonna have to somebody address that, yeah.
Absolutely, it's going to address dust control for sure, as well as any kind of anticipated runoff through here.
Yeah, we have that even in our erosion sediment control plan. We have control matting for erosion in that general area. But the thing is this site is a cut and fill site. So you're not gonna have like loose rock everywhere.
Take part of this.
Yeah, so if you look at this,
Flatten it out.
I called it a moonscape, and I wasn't really, we have to create a flat area for ADA purposes.
I appreciate it.
So we've got, literally, you go out there, it's like up and down, up and down, up and down, and these swales between these knobs of rock. So this central area right here, it's all gonna be leveled. So those knocked, except for this area right here where we have the trees, but all of this area is gonna be leveled. So we're gonna be cutting and then pushing and filling, cutting, pushing and filling. Anything, we may actually need a little bit of fill on this site, but we haven't completely calculated that out. But in general, though, it's going to be, it'll balance out. It's very close to balancing right now.
The other thing I'll point out is that at the sidewalk, whenever that was, however many years, because you know me, but behind that plumbing place, there was a mess back there, wasn't it? There was,
It was.
A nest,
A mess.
A mess,
mess.
as in junk
Listen,
piled.
no, but it was like cement and a
Yeah.
bunch of, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
was
for sure.
actually, I think I remember saying, we noticed that there was an area that might be a wetland down there, and we were
We
commenting.
were right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw that. That was a
Is
long
that- is that
time
mess
ago.
Still there?
Demolish the building. I mean, I think there's still a concrete pad there and there's.
The pad, there was, in an early, we did environmental testing under the building because we were concerned whether there was fill used for the construction of the building that may have been contaminated. We did, and we went out there and we checked it. It's passed all the tests. We've left the concrete pieces of the foundation there because we intend to use that for fill as well. So there's probably $25,000 to $30,000 in fill just in that concrete.
Wow.
So it's being left there to basically help with the fill. And so those are in our fill calculations. We did an environment, this property, you go back to the 30s and look at the old air photos, this was all farmland.
Mhm.
There was a big farm residence here, and this was actually cleared, but this was mostly woodlot in the back because it was so rough. But we did do a full environmental site assessment for the one piece that had been developed previously.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that no permit is required. We need a motion to that effect.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you so much. I don't typically say this, but I really enjoyed working with you guys the last couple months. So I work in front of a lot of land use commissions. You guys seem to really know your stuff for wetlands, so it's a pleasure to actually work with you guys. Thank you.
Most of this group has been around for a long time.
Well, 'cause
You'd be
we're also
surprised at-
educated in.
You'd be
Yeah.
surprised at how many towns people don't know what their legal charge
Well,
is.
granted,
It's or have never read their regulations or
Oh, yeah.
or don't even bother to come out to look, because you guys come out for the site walks, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
amazing, because I've done presentations in front of people and people halfway through the presentation go, oh, I thought this was another property. I'm like, oh, geez. Yeah,
I went to a meeting for Habitat. I used to work for Habitat.
yeah.
We had a site in Griswold that we had some wetlands. And so they asked me to go and present it. So I went and I figured it wouldn't be fair if I didn't tell them I was the chairman here.
Yeah.
When I did, and as soon as I told them that, oh, come on, and starts rolling out plans. What do you think about this? Because they had
Oh,
no staff. I think the longest person on there was like 3 years.
Yeah,
They had no clue what they were doing.
yeah. Well, and particularly because wetlands is a tough board to get people to come out for, so.
Yeah.
But thank you, guys. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your summer and have a great evening. Thank you.
Take care.
Nice.
all right.
All right. I don't have anything. Deb, you have anything? All right, then we'll have a motion to adjourn and
So moved.
your second.
Second.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions.
September is next. There's another, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, phew, summer's whizzing by.